There was this guy named John who was known for falling asleep literally anywhere and everywhere. One day, he stumbled upon an inn where some farmers were feeding their horses. Without thinking, he snuck into one of their carts, curled up on the straw, and dozed off. The farmers didn't notice him at first, but after traveling for a while, they saw John sound asleep in their cart. They were like, "What are we supposed to do with this guy?" Then one of them had a bright idea. "Hey, we've got this empty barrel. Let's stick him in it and leave him in the forest." So they shoved John into the barrel, sealed it up, and drove off, leaving him there. John stayed blissfully asleep in that barrel for quite a while. When he eventually woke up, he had no clue where he was or how he'd ended up in this dark, cramped space. He heard noises outside, something moving around. Peeking through a tiny hole in the barrel, he saw a whole pack of wolves sniffing around, drawn in by the human scent. As if things weren't bad enough, one wolf shoved its tail through the hole. John, thinking this might be the end of the line, grabbed the tail and wrapped it around his hand. The wolf freaked out and bolted, dragging the barrel with John still inside. The rest of the wolves scattered in terror as the barrel bounced wildly after the panicked wolf. Eventually, the barrel smashed against a rock, breaking apart and setting John free. The wolf, terrified, ran off as fast as it could. Now free but stranded in the middle of a wild mountain range, John started wandering around until he ran into a hermit. The hermit said, "You can stay with me, but I'm not long for this world. In 3 days, I'll be gone. When I die, bury me, and I'll make it worth your while." John agreed, and on the 3rd day, the hermit handed him 3 magical items before passing away. First, a stick. Point this in any direction and it'll take you there instantly. Then, a knapsack. Whatever you wish for will appear inside it. Finally, a cap. Put this on and you'll become invisible. After burying the hermit, John decided to test out his new gadgets. He pointed the stick and said, "Take me to the king's town." Boom, he was there. At the palace, John heard some gossip. The queen had this mysterious habit of wearing out 12 pairs of shoes every single night, but nobody could figure out why or how. The king had promised riches or death to anyone who could solve the mystery. Intrigued, John volunteered. The king looked at him doubtfully and said, "You? Sleepy John? How are you going to stay awake long enough to follow her?" John just shrugged and replied, "I'll give it a shot." That night, the queen went to bed in her room, and John was stationed in the room next door. Pretending to be fast asleep, he waited. Sure enough, the queen snuck past him, lighting a candle and even burning his feet to see if he'd wake up. But John didn't flinch. He was faking it like a pro. Satisfied, the queen grabbed her 12 pairs of new shoes and left. As soon as she was gone, John put on his magical cap, pointed his stick, and said, "Take me to the queen." Instantly, he appeared where she was. He watched as the queen approached a rock that opened up like a secret door. 2 dragons emerged, picked her up, and carried her to a strange, eerie forest made of lead. John followed, breaking off a twig from the lead trees as proof. The twig made a loud ringing sound which startled the queen, but she kept going. This happened again in a tin forest and then a silver forest, each time with John breaking off a twig and the sound spooking the queen more and more. By the time they reached a meadow, the queen fainted from fear. A bunch of devils showed up, revived her, and threw a wild party. John, invisible thanks to his cap, snuck into the kitchen, ate all the food they'd set aside for the cook, and watched as the devils danced with the queen until she wore out all 12 pairs of shoes. When the party was over, the dragons carried the queen back to the rock. John followed her all the way back to the palace, making sure to get there first and pretend to be asleep. In the morning, when the king asked if anyone had tracked the queen, John stepped forward and said, "I did." The king was skeptical, but John pulled out the lead twig. "She went to the lead forest," he said. The queen went pale. Then he showed the tin twig, then the tin forest. The court started to murmur. Finally, John revealed the silver twig. "She fainted here, just before partying with devils in a meadow." The queen, realizing she'd been exposed, shouted, "Let the earth swallow me!" And it did. As for John, the king was so impressed that he gave him half the kingdom. When the king eventually passed away, John became the full ruler, living out the rest of his days wide awake and on top of the world.